By far the most surprising thing that I saw at the last Nintendo Direct was the announcement that Live Alive is getting a 2D HD remaster for the Nintendo Switch, especially since so few people know about that game. It was only ever available in Japan, and Square never put it on anything else, which got to me thinking about all of the other Super Nintendo RPGs that never made it elsewhere. So these are all games that are SNES RPGs that you can only play on Super Nintendo. They never got ported, they never got remade or remastered, they were never available for download or put onto any kind of virtual console service. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list of every single possible RPG. These were all the main ones that came to mind. I'm sure I'm going to miss some, so before you go typing away at your comments that, Jared, you forgot whatever, probably, if I did, tell me about it in the comments down below, because I would love to hear about more SNES-only games. Now, before we get to all of that, here's an ad. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit home delivery service. No matter who you are or what you do, time is one of our most important commodities, and I don't like spending it on things that I really don't want to do. And that includes sweeping through the aisles of the grocery store, looking into other people's carts to see what kind of food I should probably be buying. That's where HelloFresh comes in. HelloFresh sends you all the ingredients you need for a healthy, home-cooked meal every single week. They have over 50 weekly menu and market items to choose from to help make thinking about dinner easy while you focus on your other goals. These recipes can include vegetarian options, family-friendly ones, and ones that are low prep and quick to make to help save you more time. Honestly, one of the most helpful things I've gotten out of it is being able to learn how to make different kinds of foods. It's been a great means of discovering and expanding my rather limited cooking skill set. If you want to get started for yourself, use the link in the description below or go to HelloFresh.com and use the code PROJared16 for up to 16 free meals, plus 3 additional surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes, all with free shipping. Once more, use the link in the description down below or go to HelloFresh.com and use the code PROJared16 to get up to 16 free meals with bonus gifts and free shipping, and get yourself on a more convenient and healthier course today. Let's kick things off with some right from Square Enix's own library. This is Soul Blazer, the first of what would become known as the Quintet Trilogy. Not an actual trilogy of games or stories, mind you, just all games made by developer Quintet that all feature similar themes, gameplay, or even just the same text and sound effects. Anyway, Soul Blazer is a top-down action RPG that's all about going into a dungeon to kill monsters. However, as you defeat more and more monsters, you restore more and more souls of the nearby town. In between dungeon fighting, you'll be in town talking to people to learn about the world, the town, and getting more bits of story. It's a small way to help drive purpose into why you're playing, but it goes a long way. Along with gaining experience points and leveling up, this is very much an action RPG. It's really fun to play now, despite that it's clearly a very early Super Nintendo game. It may not have as much polish as some of the other games in this video, but Soul Blazer is easily one of the better ones. It's an easy playthrough too, since if you don't finish an entire level of a dungeon, you can save and go back whenever, and all the enemies actually stay dead. Making it this accessible, plus wanting to see how the different towns develop, causes an almost addictive quality here. Soul Blazer is one of the rarer SNES games though, as cartridges alone can go for over $100. I would love to see this show up on the Switch's SNES online library. And now for the second part of the Quintet Trilogy, and one of my personal favorite Super Nintendo games. Illusion of Gaia is like a much more polished Soul Blazer, only instead of restoring towns, you're essentially helping to form the world as we know it. This one has far more emphasis on character and story. You play as Will, who finds himself on a globe-trotting adventure with his friends, and meeting numerous new people along the way. The game's structure is even pretty similar, as you go to a new town and uncover a lot of story and character dialogue, then go into a dungeon and defeat a boss. However, unlike Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia has multiple characters to play as, each with their own abilities. My favorite was always Frieden the Knight, because he looks badass. I guess as a kid, I just really liked the way his cape looked whenever he was dashing around. Whatever, it's cool. Another unique thing to Illusion of Gaia is the way you level up. Instead of experience points or what have you, you have to defeat every enemy in an area. Once you do, you'll get an increase to your hit points, attack power, or defense. It really is one of my favorite SNES games. The story is very different and avoids a lot of typical tropes you would see. There's some outlandish stuff, especially for what is usually considered to be a kid's game. You straight up play Russian roulette at one point. There's a lot of romance. Friends die by monsters or by suicide. Jeez. I played through this not too long ago on my gameplay channel. Please go subscribe to it, link in the description. And that was a great reminder as to why I love it so much. I highly recommend you find a way to play it too. The final part of the Quintet trilogy is easily the most well-known. Terra Enigma follows suit of its predecessors by having a storyline that's generally about forming the world, the people, and the animals. This story is a more lonely one compared to Illusion of Gaia, since you play as Ark, the last human on Earth, as the rest get crystallized. He interacts with animals and spirits more than anything else, but man, the ending is a doozy and it makes it all worth it. Compared to the others though, the gameplay here is the absolute best. You have so much more fluidity in combat. You have a ton of moves that can be chained together, making you feel like an expert at it very quickly. There's much more exploration in the dungeons compared to the other two, with some solid puzzle solving. Plus the story ties into the gameplay as you get new abilities thanks to the animals you are helping. I'm not doing it justice in the brief summary here. The gameplay is so freaking good, the story is great, and this boasts some of the best artistic visuals you can find on the Super Nintendo. And the crazy thing is, it's even harder to play than you could ever imagine. It was released in Japan, and it was released in Europe, but it never came out in North America, making it even crazier that it hasn't been made available onto anything else to this day. Thankfully, there are plenty of fan translation patches out there. I'm personally playing on an English reproduction cartridge. Of all the games I could possibly mention, this is the one that deserves to be put onto the Switch Online SNES library the most. Now this is an interesting one. Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals is the fantastic sequel to the rather boring Lufia 1, and it's also available on the Nintendo DS. Wait, doesn't that make it go against the entire purpose of this list? Well, not exactly. Lufia Curse of the Sinistrals on the DS is a complete reimagining of Lufia 2, making it a hack-and-slash action RPG with only one character. In fact, the entire game is so different that it's basically an all-new game and barely anything like the original. And it sucks. So yeah, Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals was ever only properly on the SNES, even though the first Lufia was ported to mobile devices. And this game is seriously great, often overlooked in the Super Nintendo library. It's actually a prequel to the first game, but don't worry, you don't need to have played the first one to understand the second. It overhauls everything from the original with some outstanding music, amazing art set pieces, and some excellent storytelling moments. The NPC dialogue is really well written, as they sound like natural spoken dialogue and real people instead of exposition machines. There's also some adventure elements with dungeon exploration and switch-based puzzles. The only real downside that the game is pretty easy, which hey, that can be a good thing if you need something low stress to play through. Hopefully you can find a way to play this one because it's another rare and expensive Super Nintendo cartridge. And now for something different. And again, another one of my favorite SNES games. Shadowrun is a cyberpunk RPG that keeps in a ton of fantasy elements, like orcs, elves, trolls, and casting magic. Shadowrun isn't a typical RPG either. It's based on the tabletop role-playing game system of the same name, made by FASA, the same company who made Battletech, which I was already a fan of. As you can see, the gameplay is actually a mix of a role-playing game and a point-and-click adventure. This means there's lots of interacting with the environment, such as doing the whole mouse over everything here to see if anything is interactable or important. Lots of picking up items and figuring out how they can be used to solve puzzles or proceed forward. The combat isn't overly exciting, since it's just pointing and clicking with your gun and hoping the dudes die before you do, but it's the exploration, atmosphere, and storytelling where Shadowrun shines best. This is most evident in the dialogue, as there are a ton of NPCs to talk to. This has never been ported or made online due to some bizarre licensing issues, since the original FASA shut down, but then it came back, and now a new company also has their licenses, and yada yada yada. If you manage to find a card of this at a local game store, definitely pick this up. Another one that you can't play anywhere else but the Super Nintendo. But if you can help it, don't. What, I never said that every game on this list had to be good. Paladins Quest is another Enix game, and I freaking hate it. There's barely anything to say about it since it's so painfully boring. It also just looks bad. The art style is awful. It's like it can't tell if it's a fantasy game, a sci-fi game, or one of those coloring sheets you get for children at Pizza Hut. The battle system is also arduous. You use the D-pad to select everything, and it gets visually and mechanically clunky. You have to level up your spells and skills by using them over and over and over again. It's far too grindy for how unfun it is. But hey, you can't find it anywhere else, which I hope it stays that way. Seventh Saga should be a cool game if it wasn't so brutally difficult. It's way too easy to get murdered by the very first enemy you fight, and that alone can make it too discouraging to want to continue. Basically, if you don't choose any one of the melee-focused knight characters at the start, you'll get killed instantly. If you manage to get past over that initial hump, well, Seventh Saga still isn't great despite its ambitions. There are some cool ideas, like the characters you don't choose being out on the world still continuing their own story, and make the wrong choice and you could end up having to fight one of them. I also like that it has a radar system to help you try to avoid random battles, though it isn't precise. The battle system isn't too flashy either, but again, has some cool ideas like emphasizing defensive actions and not just spamming attack. It is super grindy, super difficult to get through, and super discouraging. But again, anyone that can iron will their way through that will find a truly unique RPG only on the Super Nintendo. Arcana is a first-person dungeon-crawling RPG like Eye of the Beholder and Might and Magic, or Etrian Odyssey for anyone else who isn't a boomer. It's also made by HAL Laboratories. Yes, that HAL, the same one that made Kirby and the Smash Bros. Series. It has a bit of an anime aesthetic, and interestingly, everything is represented by cards. It's not really a card RPG though, that's just how they look. It has 5 dungeons to explore, and thankfully, there's an in-game map, which helps so much, especially since Arcana is really tough. It's one of those super difficult games where one wrong decision can end you entirely. It also has that thing where if just one of your party members die, it's game over. This is another one where if you don't play it, you're really not missing out on anything. Though if you like these kinds of dungeon crawlers, you could do much worse on the Super Nintendo. Hey look, yet another Quintet game. Robotrec is more of a silly, light-hearted RPG. As the name implies, it's all about robots, building your own and customizing them how you want for battles. You can change their stats, their skills, or even their colors. You can even combine robots for new results. Battles have you choosing one of your robots you have on you, like a Pokemon, and sending them out into battle. They have limited movement on the battle screen, and they need to recharge after their attacks. The coolest thing though is being able to set up skill combos and naming those skills whatever you want. It's a pretty easy game to play through too, since it isn't overly long, and it has an overworld that's reminiscent of Super Mario World of all things. All in all, it's a surprisingly simplistic game that doesn't get overly complex or overly difficult. It's got a fun concept, but it's really held back by how bad its translation is. It's highly overlooked and can make for a fun distraction. It also wouldn't be at the top of my mind when it comes to RPG recommendations either though. Because it never got ported, it's sadly yet another expensive find, as the cartridge alone is worth over $100. If you're a collector or an RPG fan, it's worth grabbing when you can. Secret of Evermore is a Squaresoft game that has never been ported or remade to exhaustion, unlike every other Squaresoft SNES game. It was developed in the United States rather than Japan, and Secret of Evermore has nothing to do with the Secret of Mana series. And despite what you may have heard, it also has nothing to do with North America not getting Seiken Densetsu 3, just to get that cleared up. Secret of Evermore was clearly inspired by Mana though, as it has the same kind of action combat, ring commands, and recharging stamina meter. The more unique aspect it has is most obviously, your dog goes with you everywhere. Sadly, there is no multiplayer co-op gameplay, but he is a good boy who does a good job of watching your back. I also really like the alchemy system, where you can combine different reagents to create magical effects. These are fun to discover, and I liked having the dog sniff out ingredients, but this also results in a lot of item farming. I think Square is hoping we all forget about this one though, because I also don't think it's very good. The story is incredibly campy, sarcastic, and I honestly think the dialogue is just stupid with way too many fake movie references. The hit detection is also poor enough to frustrate me into not wanting to play anymore. Still, there's a lot of people who do like this game, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. Thankfully, it isn't too expensive to find compared to every other Squaresoft game, so it could be worth buying. Brainlord is an adventure RPG made by the same team as 7th Saga. It's a bit more like Zelda than anything else, but there being experience points, weapon and armor shops, magic, and earning gold pieces makes it RPG enough for me. You run around massive dungeons, swinging several different kinds of weapons, defeating enemies, and solving puzzles. You can also jump, which is refreshing, and you can press a button to block with your shield. There's also these fairies that follow you around and level up on their own too, adding some variety whenever you want to swap them out. There's plenty of story and NPCs to flesh out the world, which can be summed up as satirical. It's very lighthearted, and it's very clear about that. I do consider it an action RPG, but Brainlord really is much more about the puzzles. These puzzles range from simple platforming to infuriating design choices. If nothing else, this is a good one to try out after you've grown completely tired of replaying Link to the Past or Illusion of Gaia for the umpteenth time. Thankfully, Brainlord also isn't incredibly pricey to find these days. This may be the most bizarre Super Nintendo RPG I've ever played. Evo Search for Eden is another Enix, RPG? I mean, I guess it's an RPG, right? It's about the evolution of animal life as we know it, and you play as the lowest of the lowest animal life form and eat your way up the food chain. This means having to grind a lot, and I mean a lot, of experience points to spend on evolving yourself with new parts. But man, this is such a cool idea. Depending on the part you choose, you can also get new abilities. For example, as a fish, getting a spiked nose lets you dash into enemies for damage instead of just having to bite them. Or growing wings to suddenly be able to fly. I can't stress how unique Evo is, as it's really fun to evolve yourself into silly ways and see what monstrosity you develop yourself into. However, it is absolutely a grind fest. Every single stage is killing enemies over and over and over to get enough points to evolve the way that's required and then proceed. So you can kill enemies over and over and over to evolve again. It gets really repetitive that way, but man, if it isn't fascinating with some fun boss fights. Unfortunately, playing this one legitimately is incredibly difficult. The game cartridge is one of the most valuable there is on the Super Nintendo. The game alone is nearing $300. I don't think Evo is the best game I've talked about here, but it's absolutely the most unique, and it's worth checking out someday just for that. Ideally on some kind of virtual console service, should we ever be so lucky. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click the like button, click or tap subscribe if you aren't already. It really does help the channel grow. And don't forget, I have a second channel, ProJared Plays, where I post a brand new gameplay video every single day. And I'm also streaming over on Twitch 4 days a week at twitch.tv/ProJared. And let me know about any other SNES RPGs I probably forgot. Like Dragon View. I forgot Dragon View.